Thank you all for joining us tonight for CPW's Thursday evening Meet the Artist talks. Meet the Artist is made possible by a generous grant from the Arnold and Augusta Newman Foundation, and we must be nearing like 190 talks at this point over the past 2 years. So, and in the last few months doing them here. So we're very lucky. If you're not already familiar with CPW, we were formerly in Woodstock for 45 years and are now celebrating about 2 years in this new building and 3 months with a new renovation. So if you haven't already had a chance to take a look at the exhibitions, you're in one of them, Larry Fink's Sensual Empathy, which is curated by Lucy Sant. We have another reading room of protest and print works, which is an expanded version of the publication put out by 10 by 10 this year, or last fall rather. That requires a lot of time just in itself because it can actually sit in there and read. And of course, Justine's The Rose, Justine Kurland, curated along with CPW's curator Marina Chow. That includes up to, I believe, 52 or 3 artists all working in collage, as well as a community gallery exhibition of our recent partnership with Place Corps through a photography fellowship. So please have a look. My name is Sarah Danziger. I'm the education program manager here. Some slides I'll go through real quick. We have portfolio reviews this summer, which will be held in this building during Upstate Art Weekend. So if you're already planning on being out and about, it might be a good opportunity to brush off your portfolio and have some great people take a look at it and give some feedback. We also have a summer photography workshop series. So we have things starting as soon as June 14th and running through first week of October. So please have a look. We have a great little brochure that outlines everything. And if you have any questions, please come find me. Lastly, we have another event around the Rose, celebrating the publication for the show, and that will be on June 14th, and it'll be joined by 16, I believe, of the featured artists in the Rose for a conversation with the curators. That's free and open to the public and going to be really fun. So please come out. We'll also have an opening that evening for Wendy Ewald's Sanctuary City, which is a year-long program that we've been doing with E&L students in the high school. So a lot of stuff going on. So what you're really here for is to see Andrea Frank. And so I'm going to read a little bit about her. In her practice, in her artistic practice, Andrea Frank explores complexity, ecology, and collective psychological resonances through photography and related media. She embraces collaborative, embodied processes as a creative tool towards an emergent, regenerative culture. She holds workshops, collaborates, and exhibits her work internationally. Recent publications include Lossy, Tortoise Sensory, Ecology, Beloved Child, The War Book, which I believe is on sale over there, so please have a look at that, as well as the wide format accordion artist book Seed, published in 2023. She holds degrees from Academy of Fine Arts in Munich, Germany, and an MFA from Parsons in New York City, where she also attended the Whitney ISP from 2003 to 2012. She was a lecturer at the MIT ACT program in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and she is currently Associate Professor of Photography at SUNY New Paltz, and maybe even some former students in the audience. So thank you all for joining us, and without further ado, let's introduce Andrea.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for the warm welcome. And thank you for being here tonight. And I'm really grateful and excited to be here at CPW. Such a wonderful space for photography, community, and amazing art. I know some of you haven't seen enough yet. The shows are amazing. So I'm going to be talking about, it's a bit of a journey. I'm going to be talking about the last maybe 27 years of my mostly photo-based work. I tried to look at the red thread, I try to look for these spiraling themes that seem to be coming back in different forms and in different guises almost. But some underlying threads seem to remain the same. So I hope you can come along, and it's a bit of a wild ride through quite a few projects and selections from a lot of different works that I also have a practice of other it might be sculpture or installation and other processes. So I want to start with on mass experience. This body of work came out of my coming to the United States and realizing when I was a student that I am German, and that me being German is not without a burden, that I'm carrying something, that I'm bringing something to a dialogue with my Jewish colleagues, other students, that was a real burden and a weight. And we had a lot of deep conversations, and my whole 2 years in grad school were really dedicated to researching, and particularly at some point turning around and researching my German history. I, of course, had learned about the Holocaust. I hadn't been in touch with a lot of Jewish people because many of them are in Germany anymore. That's a fact. And so I was, it was an opportunity for me to confront something that had always been there and resonated, but wasn't really looked at enough. And so this body of work here is, I spent a lot of time in archives. I looked at images, and I also did a lot of interviewing, conversations with family members, with people, etc. And so I spent a lot of time looking at images, and particularly here, images of people performing the Nazi salute. I was quite interested in what it is that this ideology, or that ideology does, that we feel like we are directed in a joint direction, and we forget about certain values that we might be maybe held before. And so I went in the dark room, I photographed with color, usually even if it's black and white images, and I would reprint those images, quite large, 30, 40, and then with oil paint out on the right side, paint out the head so that I can kind of get a sense of the energy direction. And on the other side, the same image, it's the same photograph, but I recreated the faces that had been hidden by the arms, so that I can start a dialogue with those people, like that I can work with those resonances and trying to understand what happens to their psychology in these moments. Here, similar process, 2 images, twice the same, and looking in these girls, like Hitler Jugend girls. For my aunt, who was about the age, she was the only one of 4 girls who was actually old enough to be in the Hitler Youth, and I heard from her a little bit, but it was just what they needed, where they were, right, and what kind of education they were getting at the time. And through this process, my last version of those from this series, and there's always, these are excerpts from larger series, was one where I printed much larger. And I realized if I print these images really large and I actually mirror the image, I can step into this group, into this mass, and I can look at the energy on the one side, and then I can look at these soldiers' faces on the other side. And that to me was very meaningful, because my grandfather fought in the war, on the German side, of course, and he was a good German soldier. He was doing what most Germans did if they weren't in the resistance, and that is something very heavy to even say, and it was something really complicated to negotiate. And I just now am coming back to my grandfather at a different, talking about spirals, at a different level, where my mother had found these letters that he had written from the front. He died in the last weeks of the war, and we had them translated from this old German writing that we couldn't read, Sütterlin. And so we could read his words, what he was writing to his wife and the girls, about how hard it was, or what they were doing, and how he was trying to keep them going. They already had fled from these eastern parts of Germany and were refugees at the time. So a very human story, but within this really heavy and complicated historical framework. And here, this is my grandfather and my grandmother. These dolls I photographed on one of my trips back home. When I went home during these years of research, I always looked for signs and for memories. And so I found these dolls that I had created when I was 14 years old. I was always a maker, right? So I was ceramics, sewing. I made, after photographs from my, children's photographs from my grandfather and my grandmother, those two dolls, and they were sitting on my grandmother's couch for the longest time until she died. And so, and re-photographing, I realized, this is my other grandfather and grandfather again, I realized that I was here with a self-portrait. It was me at 14 with my grandparents as children, right? And I realized that there's this very interesting, strange jump happening where I made them innocent children that I could hold and hug and be close with, right? Without having to deal with that very complicated past. This is my interpretation that made me interested in these images, right? So, yeah, it's something that is just something to carry, right? And I also, when I went traveling in Germany or in Europe, I kept looking for those signs. And here I found this in Italy on the waterfront of Rimini, this building. It's called the Colonia Novarese, a beautiful modernist building. Abandoned. I climbed, it was totally blocked out. I climbed in and took these photographs and realized, whoa, yeah, this is, I mean, I researched it later, and it was this building that was used during Mussolini times for children in the summertime, right? For indoctrinating children, educating children. And so for me, it became this space that held this ideology and that held all that residue that's still there and hasn't been really worked through and is really complicated. And so it's a shell of what we need to look at and address. There was actually an exhibition later in Rimini of this work, and they decided to do something. I haven't looked yet what they were going to be doing with the building, which is a strange other turn of events there. Looking at these, or thinking about these children in the Colonia Novarese, I realized that children are really the vulnerable first, like childhood, when we're so open and absorbent, and we will take in any ideology, and particularly, I think, when we are in group situations. So I wanted to look a little broader, not only like look critically at the Nazis and the fascists, but realizing that precious and complicated time of childhood. And so when I went to the National Archives and looked through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of boxes of images and re-photographed with color film these black and white images, I looked for images of children in group situation from really all over the world. And it was about the 30s to 70s what I found. And I was interested in finding a way of translating those images into something more general, into the sense of being shaped by society, like where this molding, this ideological molding happens in some more unconscious way. But I was also interested in, this shaping force of society and these grids, like where it's really definitely not about the individual and their feelings, but it is about controlling larger masses, which ties back to what I was thinking about. And of course, it ties also back to, or forward to, always the present moment as I was moving along, thinking about where we are today. I always felt like this work is relevant and important now, even though it is looking at historical images. I also, when I collect images, I take images, and I will mix, and I will also paint from a photograph if I feel like that gives me access to the emotional content, or lets me isolate maybe what I really want to think about. And this series here is called Who by Fire, thinks about death and life and what we think is worth keeping alive, or putting all our technology and our power into keeping alive, like these premature babies. And what is like, the other than humans, the animals, the trees, might be casualties on the sides. I was interested in the animals of the fairy tales, thinking about how we're getting stripped of a lot of that heart connection during childhood and as we grow up. And so this is, a body of work that metaphorically thinks and looks about, technology for killing or saving life. So this year is another series from archive work. This is Leni Riefenstahl's films that I was looking at the time, and there were all these, I don't have to talk to you all about who she is. As an Olympics in the 1940s and under Hitler, she would photograph these, sports events and celebrate the Aryan body, the perfection, right? And I was really, and this is 2001, this is post 9/11, where falling bodies were suddenly also having like a whole other content as a side. But I was interested in thinking about like the striving for perfection in these sports people for their country, and then falling, and also like the distortion that is in these images, like you just see blobs and blurbs, because depending on what side you look at or from what perspective you look at this, it's only distortion. And I was really interested in speaking through images in that way, and just letting them resonate. This year is a series of quite large scale black and white gilt and silver prints. They're like 35 by 50 something, quite a dance in the darkroom. When I start with bodies of work, often I have a faint image, and I obviously have the theme, and I have a sense about it, and I kind of know, but I don't know how it will shake out visually, right? Or what material I use. And so in this case, I sent a lot of friends up trees and used all kinds of different film, digital, whatever, and different methods. And what it came down to was I used infrared film, 35 millimeter, and I enlarged them really big. And because the film was so super, super, super dense, this was like 45-minute exposures. Believe me, test strips were no fun. And so I was interested in turning the camera upward. Again, thinking about this striving, us wanting to go up higher and better. And then, if you go up there, it gets really thin, right? Those branches. And also the infrared gives us the sense of that something might be wrong. Is this a flight or a reaching? And so it becomes like a very, it becomes ambiguous, and it just resonates in its own dense way, I would say. These images, of course, just want to be seen without me talking about them, but I also want to give you some sense. So here we are. During this time already, I spent about 9 years at MIT teaching photography and related media, which is its own interesting context in a sense that this is a science and technology heavy university, and that there's world-class people diving really deep with quite a bit of funding. So there's a lot happening, and I have always been, and I just am really, really worried and concerned about that polycrisis that is developing: climate, social unrest, like health, you name it, we know. And so like at MIT, everybody is working on some of these different areas, right? And so what I decided to do is I decided to go bring my camera and 4 questions: what are you doing? What, changes in the field? What are your concerns? Where do you see it going? I wanted to juxtapose them so that somebody can work on that red thread to see what happens when all these things, supercomputer, this, biotechnology, all of these things are just blossoming out at the same time, right? Because there's a responsibility to be carried as well. And there might be a responsibility, right, if we look a little bit more carefully. And so I did these interviews. I only brought the camera, no lights, nothing. I wanted it to be as simple as possible, and it became a book. I have a copy if you're interested later that I brought. But the one person that really changed my life to a certain degree was John Sturman. After all this, I did go and do all these projects with my students in the nuclear reactor and the Broad Institute, working on genes, which was a super nice side effect that I suddenly knew all those people. But John Sturman, working in system dynamics, is all about thinking systems and thinking about feedbacks. If this changes, what happens over there? Are there some reinforcing feedback loops? Are there some balancing feedback loops? And I got just so excited about that. So this, and I went and I actually audited his classes. I did some courses with him. I was all in. And it says here somewhere, global carrying capacity, right? Which is like such a technical term, like the idea that we are using Earth, like we're extracting and we're taking from Earth 1.7 times faster than it can regenerate, right? My language that I'm using right now, which is the language of this kind of work, now already feels weird because I feel like I've just stepped quite a bit further in knowing that Earth is alive and a being, and that there's reciprocity and needs to be gratitude and a real sense of being with each other. But this here made me understand, whoa, here's a way of talking about this and a way of understanding what's going on that I can communicate through maybe. And I then developed what I call system drawing, a format that first was all about interdisciplinary communication, collaboration on like one sheet of paper that we would mind map together. And then it evolved into a much more body and process-based way of collaborative, emergent process that we all find and celebrate. I'll show you about that later. I just wanted to give you a quick preview here. So I'm just going to go back quick. It talks here about consumption and degradation, right? So consumption, I was really interested in the idea of how we consume, how we need, and how our shipping systems are just going faster and faster. I was at a residency in Venice, and I had a friend who had a motorboat, like a Venetian friend, lucky me. And so we went out beyond the Lido in our little motorboat, and we went right up to those beasts in the ocean, and we would take pictures, and the guys would wave down to us. And I realized, whoa, these are these vessels that carry the stuff that we desire, that we need and want, and we want it faster and cheaper. And so I made it more of a global project. I had my links at MIT who could hook me up. And so I was super interested in being in Miami with Hamburg, shipping container ship, sorry. And so by just having these names of the ships and the places that would shift, in your mind, suddenly you realize, whoa, this is like this system that is just like crisscrossing the oceans and just delivering to us all the time without us understanding what the side effects are and what we're actually doing. And here I'm back with education. While at MIT, I realized at some point I was a limited lecturer position. It was 9 years, and I was like, okay, wow, I gotta see that I use this time. And I realized thinking about education means also thinking about spaces for education, how we educate, right? And there is a whole, like our mental models, what we think, the things that are just how we think the world is, the paradigms that are underlying are speaking through how we are with each other, how we ship stuff around, but also how we educate our youth. And so I was really interested in going into these classrooms. I went when there was nobody there, and I didn't turn the lights on. So it was this latent space, and I wanted to talk about this one directionality, that there is wisdom to be imparted, and that usually the windows were mostly closed. So it is a way of learning that is really removed from Earth and from a real knowing of the world. And so in an exhibition, I would have now like the ships in one room, and then the classrooms in another room, and then some works from, it's called Flora and Fauna. These pieces, like there's bees on the left, I'll show you some close-ups later, and then on the right, it's called Pistils and Stamen. Like thinking about how we learn about even the natural world is by, like I went to natural history museums, photographed there these dead animals, and then put them up in grids, like, like our impulse to sort and make things, understand them by previously really killing them, seemed interesting to me. And here's birds, close-ups here. You can see how I photographed these animals, and then I sandwich mounted them between plexi and then laser cut those. So, and then, you know, there's like this simulated flight pattern, right? Not going out to see them, but go like mimicking this impulse that we seem to have to kill to own. And I'd work in video also sometime, working with like critiquing technology, maybe through like using that machine and the noise and that beauty of the light laser cutting and destroying a forest in another piece that then would be installed. I'm showing you to show you how I try to make connections in exhibitions by juxtaposing maybe a video like that with then this this work on trees that was evolving as well. And I'll this is here. I already arrived in New Paltz. Clearly, these are trees in our area here at this point. I was interested in our inability to see, for example, a tree in its entirety or to relate to it. And I, you know, and I took these individual pieces and kind of roughly composited them together and started erasing again, which is interesting. Reminds me back to these earlier works, and was also interested in bringing this tree here as not something dead, but something really alive, something that is life and part of a life cycle, and something that carries the seed for the next generation in it. So in exhibitions here, a small New Paltz exhibit of some tree work, I started to do system drawings in my exhibitions, where I invited like a tree scientist, a farmer, a symbolic studies person, like all kinds of different people, and we together had conversations about what that is, the forest, right? And it was about finding a common language and a way of not teaching each other, but finding connections and finding the life in it again together. And so I started these think tanks, and I'll show you about those a little bit later. But what started as I prepared to go back out with photographs, I would do body work. I had learned that from my colleague Ursula Reisenberger, and we did that in whole groups. Some of you are here as well, and that body work and that showing up in the forest and taking the time to open up and find different connections became really, really interesting and important to me. And I focused mainly on root systems. So these are often composited because they're relatively large pieces, and I wanted the resolution. But I also, because of the encounter that was so heightened, I actually, isolated the root system, but I also didn't have a problem using pens and color pencils and maybe some scratching to adjust the image to what it needed to be to have the resonance that I had experienced at the time. So these are all trees from above or below, often broken trees or roots that I have here. I called the series Convergences, and it's all on now bamboo paper. I looked for more sustainable paper, heavy material, and then looked for or realized these pieces or these trees become whole worlds, like an asteroid, like it's something from a different world, like its own world, really, like a little universe. And my large trees, I do love making these long tree pieces, became whole and slightly worked as needed. And my bees in exhibitions from here suddenly were not in a grid anymore, but I wanted a grid, and then I wanted to show that that bee dance. Let's get them together. And to me, that was like, if I look back, like a first impetus to say, well, like shift, do something. Don't only critically look and make art about, but also get in there yourself a little bit more. This body of work here is a series of. It's an ongoing series actually of one space. Near a waterhole that I go to, and these are very large pieces. They feel like organs or brains. They are like an eddy, like a swim hole eddy space that I rephotograph again and again, and then I go in and scrape. So what you see in white is scratched off, and you have only some very faint colors underneath, and there might be constellations and stories being dialogued into the image, so that the thought about time and returning and spending time with one site and re-seeing it all the time became more and more important. I realized that I was drawn to now places that were non-places in the forest, where you didn't even know what you were looking at, but by isolating and only showing, and like taking out what I didn't see, like being very minimal, they became these little worlds that talked about their precarity and their worldness at the same time, that interested me, and I usually worked them relatively big. The scratching, something that kept happening. Talking about the precarity of nature right now, how close we are to losing so much of our basis of life. And then at some point I switched and I put these color backgrounds in, and I think it coincided with a time where I was thinking about quantum philosophy, quantum physics quite a bit, the act of seeing creates the world. And so here creates the image, and how it's a dialogue between me seeing something and really seeing it, so that it can come together or hold together as a whole and support us in our life in a way. And so this here feels to me almost like a time machine, something that condenses into being and then might just recede again. And so I was playing with those spaces and colors, and how much loss there can be, that it still holds together, and how we see how the gestalt of something will be perceivable, and when it might just fall apart. At some point, I became interested in thinking about the whole forest. I obviously spent a lot of time in forests. I actually have for years, I would go with my colleague Michael Aspen to the forest and just be and perceive and hear these images. Like, there's a lot that's already lost in a way, but it is about the sense of when you're in a forest, that there's a whole different climate, that suddenly it's cool, and that you're held, and that there's a consciousness all around you that is so present and interactive, and that interested me. Here's some views of how that might have looked in a show, and now going back or coming into this work of system drawing and showing you how photography moved in that world as well. So I had this idea of system drawing, and it was mainly mind mapping on photographs. And so I called together a group of interdisciplinary people. It was really important thinking about our systems, how we can change them, how can we actually make real, a new understanding and get involved. And so we did this body work with this theater director friend that really opened our social body, and we got to a more primal body. We walked slowly in the woods and in different places, and then came back and had these interactions. And on these photographs, the forest ground here, in our first day, we still had words. And on the second day, third day, we lost all that. We were basically engaging with drawing, with making, with other ways, and then had really deep conversations afterwards, debriefing. And they became like these arcs of process of observing emergent world building over usually around 90 minutes, and then debrief. And we continued. We went to Mexico for the next iteration of 4-day think tanks, and there it was more the cultural dimension we looked at there, and it became performative, and it was deep embodied learning in a different language, basically, that helped us understand, like re-educate ourselves a little bit, I would say. And then we came back to New Paltz and looked at just what is situation in the streets and in City Hall, working there, working in the colonial, in the Huguenot Street, 1600s building with the slave quarters underneath. And then in the woods, like really searching for the native, the indigenous resonance that is still there. I would bring that kind of process then often to shows that I had in different places, and would bring images around the theme that were resonant in the place, and then we work together. And I realized at that point that I have to be careful, because like I'm so concerned about sustainability, but this is not a sustainable process, because the images often were burnt afterwards, because it was about the experiencing, the deep experiencing of a collective process and movement. And so I decided to take out the images and just use maybe string objects, found objects, things that we realized nothing or not much was needed to create a really important process and work. And so I mentioned already a little bit that there was like this re-educating part of needing to spend time in the woods and like shifting paradigm, searching for other answers, like in nature, right? And like in one place at a time, from indigenous voices. I got really interested in systemic constellation, and we processed we played or explored these different ways of embodying different parts of a system and really feeling into them. And all of that is something that is now fluidly coming into system drawing or constellation system drawing as I now do it, or it might be a mind map. That's depends on the situation. And then COVID came, and everything from one day to the next moved online. And I had been on this track of exploring the collaborative and the connection with Earth. And here I realized, we gotta build capacity locally. We gotta start like really connecting here, and with Michael Asbel, my colleague, and other colleagues that had been always involved already in these collaborative processes. We came together regularly, and it became like a core group of maybe 7, 8, 9 people who would meet and go through think tanks, but also meet regularly to go through these processes and develop capacity. And then we actually use this awareness-based change process called Theory U to really use this systems view of understanding the system as it is. We were starting to build EDI at New Paltz, which is a collaborative that we have created, that we are bringing transformative teaching and learning, explorative, transdisciplinary work, equity considerations, non-hierarchical planning. And so we were figuring out what the system is right now and how it might want to be. And these processes are super joyful and embodied and quite exciting. And through these processes, we got to this recurring event that we call Sound Your Truth, where sculpture students made the amazing stage, and these paper scrolls where people can work. Photo students might be documenting and doing other things, and the students from Black Studies would be speaking about their own experiences through poetry or song or other creative ways. And in this way, we would have a kind of deep listening, because I think listening is what is at the core of what needs to happen. And so these formats or these ways have become ways of offering us places to listen. And same in the classroom with my grads, they will do their system drawing and help each other listen to each other as they do that. Here's a project that thinks about that time horizon and deep listening to one place. It's called Seed. I went for a year every week to the Hudson Valley Seed Company farm, to their seed plot where they grow vegetables and flowers for seed and not for consumption. And so I made this infinite loop accordion book. And it has like these little text parts sewn in. It works again with this knowledge that we are at a place where we're losing the web of life to a certain degree and how precarious it is. And I'd like to just read for you the first of these little booklets that are sewn in. Seed. A photograph drawn with light. An object, flat. Resonating some of what was, what we need to remember. Can a photograph serve as an off-site teacher? It is so different from being there. Representation as an idea shifts when matter is perceived as vibrating atoms, and when our consciousness is understood as the creative force behind that which we perceive. How can we expand our horizons of awareness and of caring 7 generations into the future? How can we dream this rich space of potentiality, the dense mesh that connects us all into a thriving world, and then inhabit it one step at a time so that it is there for them when they enter? So there's 4 sewn in booklets, and then it's these images that are kind of woven into each other, and it's becoming this infinite loop. There's also an installation format, but this is how it found its place. I've been struggling with that project for a good while. And I want to close with this last project that I just did, or started really with Oscar Moreno Escaraga from Bogota, Mexico, just this spring, where we involve our students. He's from Utadeo there in somatic choreographies, an initiative, a collaboration where we wanted to bring North and South together, indigenous and Western thought, and old and young. And so his students started with making relational objects that will create some kind of connection with Earth or with their ancestors, like in this deep way. And he brought images and videos that we looked at here and exhibited here. And then my students responded to those images with their own work. And so there were these dialogues of photographs of students working at this deeper level of listening, observing, and learning about each other. And there were texts involved. And this is an exhibition that we did in Bogota then, where these images, where we paired the images and we had their text in English and Spanish with it, so that we all could learn. And what was quite exciting was as we had to install the show, we decided to make that as part of a process and a system drawing process. So I brought that thread. You've seen that red thread in different places. That usually holds the space where the process happens. And I brought some sound making things and some string, and the students brought some objects. And then we got into that zone after a little bit of waiting. And then we placed objects, painting. We took the paintings, photographs. We took the images off the walls and placed them in relation to each other. And we created new relations. And just for ourselves, as a process of deinstallation, created connection and a relearning, like a rethinking of how these things flow together and are together, and how there's not one way how things need to be, but there can be healing and joy and process in all of those. All right. I hope you have some questions and thoughts for me, but thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Yes.
Talk a little bit about that image in particular. It was one of the latter ones where you have your color background on the gradient, and then the tree that almost looks like it's broken, and then there's pieces of moss and other.
I know which one you mean. Yeah.
Floating. I'm just stop. Go back.
Oh, this one?
No, the other one with like a chunk of that one.
Yeah.
Like, so when you talk about your process there, like how many images are here, and how does this come together?
Mm-hmm. So I would think for this image, there might have been 10 different digital images, possibly plus minus. So the focus often in these images is different, so that I can think about, create the space as I would like it. And then I kind of put the image together, and then I take out and take out and take out as much as, in this case, as possible, to still read this as a forest, a view of a forest. I wanted it, and behind there is like this gradient image with maybe three layers of gradient colors that are coming together. Is that?
Are you printing to kind of see it in pieces, or are you actually just doing everything digital first?
This is all digital.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. Now I don't want to do digital. Now I'm working with Shay, who's right here. We're so excited to have a little grant from SUNY to look for sustainable processes to make our work and to bring it also into the classrooms more. Not that we have to invent anything, but we have to kind of make it and go through the motions and play to see where we're going. So I'm excited to go analog. I'm needing it. But there was this time I was excited to be doing digital. I go through phases. Like the early work was all film. And then there was this big digital phase, and now I'm post. Yes.
I have two questions, and you can decide which one is more interesting. One is, how are you changed as a person practicing somatics? How did it change you as a photographer? And the other one is about making system maps and how you think about the circulation of your work in relationship to the system.
I'll take the first, and maybe a little bit of, like it's hard to choose in a way, because I feel like I think it's important to say that the somatic, like inviting the whole body in, has been transformative, and it is something that happened over this span that I showed you, right? And it's super exciting, and it is difficult sometimes. Photography has been like something to drag along at times, because it is like this unsustainable, heavy, but thing that is amazing. But if I think about it, even the plexi work, right? All that plexi, like it's tens of thousands of years in the landfill. Can I do that anymore? No, I don't think I can, right? So I'm more humble, and I think it's more important to be doing things that bring transformation, shift the system, even just in the small. Like I think, like there were all these patterns that we saw, right? Like that I was studying, and I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And we know things are happening now again, and we're in the next loop of this. But I think, like, I'm interested in the fractals, like Mary Brown's fractal scale shifts, where we play as Eddie folks or as system drawing makers with, and photography becomes a little document. And I'm trying not to photograph officially, because I don't want these people to be like the faces, and people to be self-conscious, because it is where you forget your brain and you're in there. So I think there's a shift happening by engaging in that. And I trust that. And that's exciting, and it's complicated, because how does that go out and make changes? I'm actually right now with Shay, we're thinking about, are we doing these constellations, system drawings, and there might be some things are they getting restaged? Are they getting photographed and then translated? I don't know, because I think there's something that might find its way into my photo work, but I haven't figured, it's like this latent image right now. I'm in another loop, just keeps going. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in asking a question. You showed in the middle, you showed some classrooms.
Yeah.
And could you explain again why you photographed them?
Yeah, I can go there. So I was really thinking about how we are in this predicament, right? Our systems are all built to run us against a wall. We're already at the wall and we keep driving at high speed against it, right? We cannot emit more. We cannot emit more CO2 safely and keep living the way we do. We cannot keep like fighting against each other and not understand each other and make the rich more rich and the poor more poor. You know, all of these systems, the way they are lethal in a way. And the competition, like the values that underlie competition, right? Instead of cooperation or trying to, you know, individualism versus group, or like extraction versus regeneration. All of those things are part of our current paradigm. And the current paradigm, in my mind, it starts in school with the children, right? We live it and the kids learn it, or we teach it in the universities. Somebody says, this is how you make money, guys, here in school. You know, I had a student, he was like, oh yeah, my friends, like, I'm feeling bad because I think I'm going to have $150,000 starting job. And I was like, oh, you know, because I wasn't making that much. And it's just a whole, like they're like in a whole other world there. And we all are. We're thinking the wrong thoughts. I think the thoughts we need to think is, how can we connect with Earth, with each other, and find out how to generate life.
I asked why you photographed them.
Oh, and I'm telling you everything else.
Do you? My next question would be: do you see a relationship between what you teach and where you teach?
What I teach and where I teach. Hopefully, let's just to clarify, I wanted to talk about how paradigms get reinforced through this kind of setup of information being transferred without questioning it. Is it life affirming, or is it? So for me right now, what I teach photography, but I also teach sustainable processes at times. I'm at the university. I try to take the students out into the world a lot, or into the woods to photograph. So I think where I teach is important. And I think that connection is important, but there's a lot of open questions, right? With like, okay, I'm hired to teach photography, but we're also at a global crisis moment. How do we navigate that? And I try to just, find a balance there, which is its own challenge. And I'm not saying I'm succeeding. I'm struggling with that every day. But I feel like it's not satisfying. Like somehow I didn't answer your question. Is that correct?
Well, if I compare these pictures to, I think the last picture you showed, where you show your students doing, I prefer those over that.
Yeah. And that's where the spiral comes in. Me too. This here is like a critical view on something that's not working, right? And this other was an effort. Like that was kind of the story I was trying to tell.
Now I would ask, well, why don't you try to photograph the present classroom in this manner? Because I would say where you teach and what you teach has nothing to do with each other.
Okay. I got to think about that.
Teaching is not dependent on the place where you are.
I totally disagree with that.
Are you a teacher?
I used to.
Okay, because I disagree as well.
That's okay. I mean, I disagree with that.
It's her work though.
Yeah.
Emily.
Yes.
I haven't quite formulated this question yet.
We'll get back to you.
Thinking a little bit about light and your relationship with light.
Light.
Light, and like photography, you're capturing light, and like thinking about when you're composing images, when you think about light and the energy of that light in your compositions. I feel like I'm seeing that. I'm not sure if I'm assuming something.
It depends on the project. Sometimes here, I was looking at the lack of light. I was looking, like I didn't turn anything on, and I tried to have it kind of dead, and the images look a little dead, and I want that. So, but with the images of the plants, here, for example, light definitely was super important, right? I would be drawn to a place and a time, and I would take just this 1 or 2 images, and the light is right, and that's it, right? Or so yes, light is important, but sometimes I use it not like photographers should be using it, if you know what I mean. Yeah. 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 I'm super interested, of course. And it's drawing with light and that's consciousness and, you know, all of that is fascinating for me. Yes.
When you said you scratched the surface of the plant or I'm not sure what you're scratching things out.
Yeah.
Are you doing that on the surface of the plant?
Yeah.
I mean, I just really find that process of removing in a time when things are being removed at a rapid rate.
Thank you. Yeah, it feels meaningful somehow to take, it's like with an X-Acto knife. It's quite, you know, and I try to have a mask and a vacuum, you know, because there's a lot of pigment that's coming off and that where then there's only a faint trace left. And it is a little bit like that we are leaving, like how we are ravaging Earth, how we are, you know, leaving land unplantable, etc. It's a little bit like that. Yeah, thank you. Edward, do we go back?
We can. So I would maintain to say that basically teaching does not depend on the location.
Yeah.
Yes, environment has certain influences, but marginal. The medium is the message.
I think that is a valid position, and I don't want to I don't think we need to go. I just tell you that I love the idea of place-based learning and education. Like that place is the place where one, our community is, where we can engage, where we can learn everything about the world or most of it that is important for our collective survival and thriving. And so for me, place is super important. And then to understand how do I, you know, like, and now I'm teaching photography because I'm also thinking sustainability generally, right? I'm having wearing different hats sometimes in all that because I'm super excited about rethinking education. And we developed STREAM education where STEM is packaged not only with art, but the R for relevance, rigor, regenerate, yeah, like all of that. Like I could go really far there, but I think we just leave it there that there's these different, right? Yeah, Wells, thank you. Any other? Yes. I wouldn't call it. I think art is political. So, but it's not your traditional political. Like our Eddie work, for example, definitely is one where we are responsive to the moment. When there was a noose or like a dog leash hanging in a tree that could have been read as a noose, we came together with some of us here and held space for dialogue and maybe some clay to work. And, you know, like, is that political? I think it is. I think it is a way of holding, but not political in trying to say, we are for this and you're for that, but it is one for bringing together, for creating understanding and a common language and a place of being heard. Because I think the being heard is what's missing at the moment. And I think in the end, like I forgot to read of the war book. Please read something. Like there's like this is a book, it's a children's book from the Beloved Child series that you saw earlier. It basically talks about how war comes about. Where you're taught that this is the enemy and that. So it's like read if you like or get one. It's absurd that we are thinking we need to fight against it. We all want the same thing, and we need to listen and move forward together somehow. And yes, we're in a weird place, and what I'm saying sounds really, really green. I don't know. Yes, Chica.
I just had like
Mm-hmm.
That's a fine line of separation of, like, you want to, I feel like there's like a fine line between having your own opinions, demanding other people to
Mm-hmm.
versus still being political with your opinion and encouraging discourse. And I have a kind of dangerous question because we could go back to Nazism, but like, how do you feel about like the fact that in our society today there's more people ever on Earth, right? And we have such, we have limited resources, and I wonder how that informs your work, or is that a dangerous place to go? It's systems.
Yeah, it's a systems thinking question, and for many, the amount of people on Earth are the one thing that's troubling, right? And if we were fewer people, we wouldn't have this issue. That's the question, but it's pretty much right. So, like, I'm a climate interactive ambassador. There's like this interactive tool. It's also an MIT thing. Yeah, I got a lot of ideas from MIT. I did, right? It's a pretty interesting systems modeling tool where you can see what would happen if we took down our, population, etc. And it's not like the big lever. That's not the one thing that will change everything. It's like us all doing everything we can. So I don't need to go there, and I think it's not healthy. And in the more advanced, more technologized, or more societies, there are like birth rates are going down. There's certain places where it's still going up. So I think it's not something that needs to be.
I just wondered like how it has an effect on our climate. Like even like let's say Japan, it's getting, like you said, it's minuscule. Is that technology evolution and consumption?
Can you ask that question again? Like,
I'm just wondering, like, you said that population was minimal to the overall effect on the climate. So is it us utilizing things?
I think it's our utilization of energy, particular. Like this is mostly energy modeling for buildings, for transportation, for and then where the energy comes from. Is it green energy, or is it renewable, or is it not? Those are major drivers. And then there's methane, and then there's farming. Like how we deal with the earth is just so out of whack that, like, thinking about this one thing is like, we got to start here right now, right here. Yeah. Yes.
I have a question about, I guess, how you see the world on this. I'm thinking about your earlier work where you were talking about your personal history and your personal stories, but the way you approached it was to sort of photograph the images as a way of just sort of relating to a historical event. And as your works develop, it seems like you're not engaged in sort of self-expression, you're engaged in your community and what you've been learning and what is in particular. And I was just curious, like, how yourself and in general you see the role of the artist changing, or what you feel like your job is as an artist.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, for me, I'm coming back to needing to and I'm not showing that, but I've been in the studio all along. I'm just not outputting, and it felt like so weird to want to have a space, like show my work when there was like Black Lives Matter, and like suddenly like people were being heard in different ways and shown, and I don't need to put my work in there at that time. I need the making as part of my personal expression. And now I feel like I'm making another body of work that probably will be shown at some point if it's good enough, or, but to me, it's about being so awake and to listen and to be open to whatever needs to happen. And I think we are going through extraordinary times, and they're more and more extraordinary. And for me, it's listening really deeply what I need to do and where I need to put my energies. There's a lot of even internal work and ancestral work that I need to do right now personally. And it's like just it's the spiral, all of that. I see it all. It's all the same to me. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.